Good evening, everyone. I am so excited for tonight's conversation. Welcome and thank you for joining. We're going to get right into it because we have one of my favorite people on the planet as our special guest tonight. If this is your first time joining my live stream, I'm your host, Julia Rock. I'm the head career coach and CEO at Rock Career Development. And tonight, I am stoked, honored, privileged, all the things to welcome Miss Tiffany Waddell Tate as our guest expert for the evening. Let me go ahead and give you all the scoop on Tiffany because she's amazing. So I want to give her full due. So Tiffany Waddell Tate is a founder and CEO of Career Maven Consulting, and she is on a mission to help people find and do good work on purpose. As a career and leadership expert, she helps individuals and companies reimagine the future of work through one-on-one coaching, digital education, and training and development for organizations and teams. Welcome, Tiffany. What's happening, girl? Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me, Julia. I'm pumped for the conversation tonight and so flattered that you thought of me to have it with you. So I'm excited.
Yes, thank you. Black History Month. We getting all the Black people in here this month. I'm so excited for this conversation because, like we were talking about backstage, there's a lot of conversation about getting the job, getting in the door, right? Getting the six-figure salary and really establishing that. But what happens after that? I've seen so many people who look like me and of other races where it's like their careers stagnate because there's not enough conversation of how do you get past that entry point or get past maybe that first promotion. Mm-hmm. And so I'm glad that you were willing, and thank you so much for coming tonight for us to talk about it. So, but you know, let's set the foundation first before we get into anything. Let's set the foundation. Why is it even really important for us to have this discussion? Like I said, I've seen it personally, and I know you've seen it with your clients, but, you know, for a lot of folks, they may be thinking, well, the idea is for me to get a paycheck, you know, go to work and go home. Like, why does it even matter for me to really level up or progress in my career? You know, can I just get a paycheck? So just any thoughts on that to set the foundation?
For sure. I mean, it's totally okay if you are pursuing jobs for a paycheck. Your job does not have to be your end all be all. It doesn't have to be your source of happiness. And I always tell people, especially Black and brown people, but anybody listening, that you don't control the company you work for. So variables are always changing. Unfortunately, as we're seeing in media, a lot of larger corporations are doing massive reductions in force or layoffs. You might have a life event happen where you need to go to another organization or move to another organization or make some changes based on what's happening in your personal life. Or you may just have other interests, right? Like someone could join your team and you're not feeling it anymore. It doesn't always have to be a mega event or a mega traumatic event. At the end of the day, when you work for an organization and you don't run your own organization, you really want to think of yourself as a flight risk. So I don't encourage people to get so comfortable with a really shiny salary. I know a lot of people are talking about six-figure jobs and all this and that. And if you're fortunate enough to make that level of earning capacity, that's excellent. And you always need to be prepared for what's next, whether that's what you're learning next or the opportunity changing or the landscape looking different, or you might just want to be in a different function inside an organization. So you want to be really comfortable articulating your skills and seeing what's out there, even if you're happy with the job you have right now.
That's a really good point. And I think that there's always this thought about you've got to go and job hop to another company or you got to go someplace else. And you can, and there's a lot of earning opportunity in that and so forth. And you learn a different culture. But there's a lot to be said for, you know, growing right where you are and taking advantage of the opportunities that you have. Because the good thing about staying within the company is that you already know a lot of the procedures and everything. I say it's the devil you know, right? So at least, you know, so you kind of know what you're working with. So I love that idea. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to pick your brain on, you know, for folks who may be just starting in their careers, right? Because, you know, you and I have been in the game a long time, but for people who are now just starting their careers or maybe they're just starting in a new role in an organization, how is it possible, or what are your thoughts on them being able to set the right foundation to actually get to the next level in their career? It's like, okay, you're walking into this store fresh, you're now starting this job. How do you start that foundation early to make sure that you're on that trajectory to go upward?
Absolutely. I think if you are new or early in your career, the first thing I always recommend that people do is understand the organization where you are and remember that it is a business. It doesn't matter what your job function is. Theoretically, even if you are doing a very administrative level role, then your job has an impact on the company, and you need to understand the flow of the company, meaning how do they make money? How do they save money? And how are decisions made? Now, if you're new to your career, you might not have a line of sight on how executive leaders are making decisions within the organization. But at the very least, you want to absorb as much as possible and understand the performance management process. Ask your manager a ton of questions about how it works so you understand the process and the policies around how workforce planning or promotions or stretch projects are given out, starting with your manager, and then, of course, understanding the organization landscape and policies and structures itself, because that way you're armed with information while you're learning how to do your job and learning how your job impacts how the company makes or saves money. Like, at the end of the day, I think sometimes we get really excited about our jobs, which is good. And we need to remember that, like, even when you work in a nonprofit, it's a business. So you want to understand how your contributions are impacting that business so you can articulate that later.
And that's a huge point. I mean, just there are several huge points there. One, just thinking about how does your role help to make money, or what value does it add, right? Because when you're going in to ask for a promotion or something, if you can't articulate why, what you've done and what value you've created for the organization, they're going to be like, okay, yes, you want a promotion, but why? Like, why should we give that to you? And it can't just say, well, I did my job. It's like being able to point to direct value makes is really important. And then that pro tip around how do they do workforce planning? How do they do their budgets? Because they love that answer or love that excuse, like, oh, well, it's off cycle, right? We're not really on the budget cycle right now. Come back in 6 months and so forth. So once you kind of know how that works, you can time your requests, right? To say, okay, well, I know they're going to do this in October, so let me back it up because I know the cycle's coming up. And then the last thing that you mentioned around performance management. Just being able to own that process, like understand it so that you're not, when you get feedback, that you're not surprised, or like when you're asking for promotion and they're giving you all this feedback, it's like, dang, I wish I had known that before. So really being involved in that process. So that's so good.
Yeah.
And so thinking about someone who may be early in their career or even starting a new role. So let's say they're getting to know the performance process and ththey're starting to soak up knowledge. Do you think it may also be helpful for folks to get mentors? Some people like to say, well, I did it on my own. I put the team on my back and I did it myself, like I'm Kobe, right? But what are your thoughts around the value of having mentors, in the workplace, especially if you're getting started?
For sure. So I think it's important to have mentors inside the organization where you are, and if you can, relationships with people outside of the organization. And the reason I say that is you want to have varied perspective. So, and let me pause for a second and just define what I mean by mentorship. So a mentor is someone that either has a skill or a set of experiences that you admire, want to understand better, or want to emulate or like replicate. So an example of that would be, I know early in my career, there was a woman who was in a more senior role to me in the same department where I worked, but I didn't report to her. And I saw her do presentations and meetings, and I was demand that level of attention when I'm having a meeting with peers or I'm at work. And so I went to her and I just said, hey, I really appreciate your style. You seem to be very confident when you're facilitating these meetings with all staff or with senior leaders. And I'm wondering if you would be open to me shadowing you, or if we could have coffee, because I'd love to just learn more about how you've developed those skills over your career. So that's an example of why I approached the person, what I wanted to talk to them about, and then they can opt in. They can say, yeah, girl, we can go get some coffee, And that could be a one-time conversation, or it could be someone that you go to over time whenever situations arise or you want feedback or insight from someone who's been in your shoes before. So that's kind of definitively what a mentorship relationship could look like. But the reason why I say it's good to have mentors inside your company and outside is the people inside have more knowledge of the political landscape of the company where you are, right? And so you're learning about their skills and experience, but you're also learning about the organization through their lens. And then the people outside you can talk to without the risk of messing up your reputation.
Found out. Don't want to be
right. I was trying to say it professionally, but it's like you want to have people that you can have real deep talk with and not worry about who is going to get to, right? Not saying that you should be operating in fear, but you should be really thoughtful about what you say and what you share with people, especially inside your organization, because best case scenario, someone means well, but they repeat something you say to somebody else, and that informs that person's opinion of you, and so a lot of words, Julia, basically to say that there is no shame in having mentors. And frankly, you go faster and further if you can learn from other people's experience than just trying to figure it out on your own, right?
Work smarter, not harder is the motto. And I think it's good context for people to understand that you can have both, and it's probably valuable to have both. But let's say you can only get one or the other, you can still get a lot of value from either one. Absolutely. And like you said, having someone in the organization who can help you navigate some of those politics, because the corporate America politics, I mean, that game is ugly. And so, so if you don't have any line of sight, you don't know the unwritten rules or anything. I mean, you can find yourself stepping on landmines that you didn't even know were there, and no one's there to help you. So really good tips on that. Mm-hmm. And so speaking of mentors, you've probably heard the term about mentors versus sponsors, right? So sometimes those two are conflated. And especially if someone may be new in their career thinking about, okay, I want to level up, but I want to move up quickly. Maybe I just need mentors. Maybe I just need sponsors, or I don't even know which one is the right thing. So can you clarify the difference between a mentor and a sponsor?
For sure. So a mentor is someone that you want to learn from their skills and experience. A mentor can turn into a sponsor, but it's not automatically the same thing. A sponsor is someone who has a sphere of influence, meaning they can influence decision-making that's happening, or they have access to other relationships or resources that would be helpful to you, and they connect you to those relationships or information. So example of that would be, let's say that the company you work for has a performance management process where you rate yourself, your manager rates you, and then your skip level, the person who's your manager's manager, has to calibrate both of those assessments. So they are going to make a decision about whether or not you get money, and they're not your direct manager. So if you've already been making time periodically to connect with that skip level, or you've gone to a presentation they've done, or you've asked them for insight on, hey, I'm new in my career and long-term, I see myself, really knocking it out of the park. I would love advice from you. So they kind of know you as a human being and a person, in addition to the good work that you're doing. Mm-hmm. Then they're more likely to be able to be a sponsor to you when it comes time for those promotion conversations to happen, because you're not just a number on a chart. You're a human they have a relationship with. Now, they may not be the best person to be your sponsor, right? Like there's so many other factors in that, but that's an example of how your manager's manager is in a position of decision-making power. And if you have a positive working relationship with them, they can serve as a sponsor to you, which influences your ability to access resources or other relationships. Whereas a mentor is someone you go to just sort of seek advice or counsel, but they might not influence your career advancement or your career growth.
I love that. I mean, what I tell my clients a lot of times is that your sponsor is someone who has the juice, right? That they walk into rooms that you can't get in. It's just that simple. Like the door to that room is not open to you. And
It is
it's no tea or shade. That's not a room that you're gonna get into right away. So you having someone in your corner who has that kind of juice, can definitely make a difference in your career. And again, not to say that mentors aren't helpful for your career, because again, you're getting that advice and that support, or even if you just need a place to vent. But having the sponsors, as you said, somebody who can walk and speak on your behalf, that goes a long way. And I love the tip about it could be your manager's manager, right? It doesn't have to be some VP in another department somewhere else, right? It could be within your own group, someone who's willing to advocate on your behalf. So pro tip, y'all, pro tip. And so we've talked a little bit about folks who are early in their career and trying to get going, and for them to really set themselves up the right way to move forward. But what about someone who's mid-career, who's been in the game for a while, who's been at their company or in that same role for a while? How can some of those folks who may have just kind of been not complacent's the wrong word, but kind of staying in the same place for some time, how can they get their name and their face back on the radar so they can get back on that upward path?
Yeah, that's a good question, Julia. I mean, part of it depends on the type of organization you work for, right? So if you work for a large global company and there are what I call ad hoc work streams, so maybe you are in your job, but the company is prioritizing some new initiative and they pull people from across the organization to work on these, in these small project groups. So it's kind of like in addition to your job, but it impacts the company in a positive way. That's an example of a stretch project that you could say to your manager or your manager's manager, depending on where you sit in the org chart. Hey, I'm really interested in workplace culture. I'll give you an example. And maybe I work in accounting, but I'm like, you know what? I'm really interested in workplace culture. I'm not trying to have a totally different job, but if there are opportunities that come across your desk for people to be added to these work streams or projects that are related to our workplace culture, please keep me in mind, right? So that's one example. These that might be a little bit outside of the scope of what your job or team is. Of course, you only want to do that if you truly have capacity to do it well. Like you don't want to volunteer for some extra work and you're going to be out here struggling. Okay,
like, don't do struggle bus. No,
don't do that. That's not going to work in your favor. It's going to be bad. But you could also go to your immediate, leader. I'm assuming you have a really positive working relationship with them, which is why you've been in your role for a while, right? And you're doing a good job. But you can say, hey, I'm happy with the role that I have. I'm very committed to this company and this team. And I'm just curious to level up in my skills. Maybe I want to upskill in this area, or I want to take on a little bit more leadership in this area. Is this something that you can be a success partner with me on? And can we maybe map that out together? Because there might be things that you know or see or need that I'm not aware of that I could contribute to. And you can sort of co-design it with your leader. So then you're kind of putting them in a powerful partnership seat where they're helping you design what upskilling or taking on stretch projects looks like. So when it comes time to do that performance management conversation, you will have already been seeding your growth and development as part of your goal development plan, rather, for the year.
And so I want to sneak another question in there. So thinking about that performance management, or having that conversation with your supervisor and building that development plan as to what you can go after. So how should people handle, say, one-on-one? Should they be scheduling those one-on-ones to kind of keep up with that, because you don't want surprises in the performance? So what are your thoughts on one-on-ones and how people should manage those?
Yes, I'm so glad you asked me that, because I stay on Instagram talking about this, because people are like, okay, I don't want to hear y'all in the comments. Do not at me.
Let's keep it. It's a family show, guys. Don't get after Tiffany. Don't get after Tiffany.
Don't drag me. But I'm going to tell people 100% of the time that I don't care who your manager is. I don't care what level of leadership they are at. The only person responsible for driving your career is you. So you should be scheduling one-on-ones with your manager. If they do not already have a structure for those conversations, 99% of the time they do not, because being a working manager is really hard. They're managing you and they're supposed to do some other job. That's 2 jobs.
And they're probably upset they're only getting paid for one of those jobs.
Exactly. Even if they're really nice. So you want to set those meetings and stay on top of them. Don't let them cancel on you over and over again. Create the working agenda. Send them like 2 or 3 questions ahead of time to let them know, hey, at our meeting, I want to give you a couple status updates on, these projects. And I want to fold in some time to talk about feedback in my performance plan for the year so we can touch base on this periodically. So it's not a secret and it's baked into your agenda, and you make sure you are keeping track of it every time. The notes that you're, the takeaways from the conversation or whatever actions y'all have agreed upon, send a follow-up and make sure you have not only a paper trail, but a conversation trail that you are staying on top of. So yes, you should be having those meetings with your manager. You should drive the agenda, and don't let, most people mean well, but the business or fires or whatever are going to come up, but don't let that get in the way of your development plan being a priority.
Absolutely. And one thing that I've done with my managers, that I have a OneNote. So that way we have a notebook and we're tracking, we have it by year, we have it by session, so that we have it all in the same place. But also it's useful for the performance cycle. It's useful for promotion conversations. It's useful for just keeping track of all those projects. And so that way, if you have your paper trail via email, if you choose to do that, and then if you have it in one place, you don't have to well, what was that Word doc I had that one time? Put it in the OneNote. So
yes, a shared document that you can show track changes and earlier revisions on is pro tip. Okay, I had a manager one time. I was leading a cross-functional project, and I would lead the status meetings. And I came to the status meeting, I pulled up the project dashboard, and all my content was gone because she had manipulated the document. Even though I owned it and controlled it, other people had access to it. And she thought she'd saved a copy. And I was like, Miss Ma'am, you did not. You deleted my content. But revision control brought us back to where we needed to be.
Score. That's crazy.
It was a wild time. But Julia, there's also something else, I think, for people who are thinking about just planning for performance conversations. In addition to understanding the company and having that running document with your manager, you should have your own document. I know some people call it a brag sheet. I call it a win sheet. Yourself, that you're keeping track of, like, what the things are you said at the top of the year you were going to do in your job. And you're keeping track of any extra stuff where you have positively impacted projects, people, or the place. So that way you're not trying to scrape together, looking at your calendar of conversations you had. You are keeping track of it each week, like at least 30 minutes a week before you close out for the weekend. Look at your win sheet and update it with any like quick wins that you've had in your role. So that way you've already done the work up front to prep for the performance process, and you're not trying to recreate the wheel. And it's top of mind, so you can talk about it in meetings with your manager. That is a really great way to stand out, as well as, like, we're kind of talking about performance management, but you should always be able to, kind of low key brag on yourself and say, like, hey, I am really proud of how we were able to overcome that barrier on that project, and stakeholder X is really happy. And I would love any recommendations that you have to make sure that we can do this in a bigger way, right? So you're also planting seeds with your manager and whoever else needs to hear it, that you're getting your work done and you're adding value along the way. So they can repeat it. They've heard it. Everybody's heard it, and it's highly visible, because doing a good job is not enough to get promoted. It also has to be visible.
Yes, I love that so much. Oh my goodness. The idea of, for so many of us, like, well, just work hard. Let your work speak for itself. It's like, what? No. because I mean, and I was someone who used to believe that, like, hey, if I just do a good job, someone's going to see that. And then after a while, you realize real fast that no one's seeing it. They don't know what you're doing because you haven't said anything. And one way that I've gotten my clients comfortable with bragging, I tell them, if it's not bragging if it's facts. so it's not bragging if it's facts, right? And so the fact is, if you're adding the value, if you're running those amazing projects, like, speak up. So I love that, Tiffany, really, really do. And so let's talk about it now, networking, because we've talked about the supervisor and the role that they play and having those discussions and doing one-on-ones. So, but let's talk about networking, because we also talk about mentors and sponsors. But how do you see networking, really enabling your ability to move forward and get to that next level? And what's the right way to go about doing that in your company?
You know what? Listen, was it Issa Rae who said, like, don't spend all your time trying to network above you, but you need to get to know your peers and your colleagues, because these are the people that you're going to be swimming with for a long time. I think it was Issa Rae who said that.
She did get, because everybody's trying to go upward, and she's like, you need to be building and looking to the right and to the left.
100%. I think that is 100% true in general, but it's especially true inside of an organization if you want to level up there. Because especially these corporations, honey, somebody who's sitting right next to you could be your boss in 3 months, or you could be their boss in 3 months. So you're like, oh, I don't know how we got here, right? So you always like real fast. So you want to like keep it professional. Okay, we are not at work to make friends. You might make some friends, but that's not why you're there. That's a whole other live that we can talk about.
Seriously, we'll park though. I'll bring you back to that one.
But the second thing is you do want to network within the organization, because it helps you do two things. One, again, remember I said your job is to figure out how your role is influencing change on the business's strategy. And generally speaking, you could water down a strategy into making money or saving money. There are other aspects of that, but that's kind of the gist.
Those are the nuts and bolts.
So if you're networking with other people within the organization, you start to understand, okay, for other types of jobs, how does that fit into the organizational structure and strategy? And how do these things flow together? And where are there opportunities to either partner, collaborate, break silos, or influence change? If I understand how the business is moving, then I understand sort of the tides. The second thing that networking with people does is you find out about opportunities. So when people are talking about advancing their careers within an organization, most of the time it is not in a straight line up, because there are not a lot of seats in the straight line up, right?
Pyramid.
It's a pyramid. Like there's the CEO, there's some VPs, and then everybody else.
Right.
So the rest of us, okay? The funnel is upside down.
Right.
And so if you're trying to grow in your career, especially if you're a new professional or a mid-career professional, you are probably going to be moving diagonally or laterally in terms of the org chart, even if you're making more money and getting a bigger bonus or getting stock options and stuff like that. You may not be flipping from your seat to VP straight away, depending on how the org structured, but you could still be getting more coins, higher level projects, higher levels of influence. So if you're networking with people, then oh, that team, they're going to have an opening soon, and I've been working well with them, and I already have rapport, and I have transferable skills. They might be open to me coming over there and being a project manager over there, right? So I would say those two reasons are mega key when it comes to networking. And the other thing is, I should have said there's 3 reasons. That is a way to make your visibility accelerate your visibility, because you're not relying only on your manager to speak on you. You're allowing other people who see you in action to speak on you, which gives you political cachet, if you will.
To quote a Jay-Z reference, because Jay-Z is my favorite rapper, it's like, we don't believe you. You need more people, right? And so you know what I mean? And so the idea of having other people who can speak on your behalf outside of your immediate management or even your immediate group, having people in different parts of the organization who can say, oh yeah, I worked with Tiffany on that other thing. Oh no, Tiffany was a part of our project over here. And so you have kind of this chorus of people even beyond your group to kind of say, oh no, we definitely know what Tiffany's about and what she can deliver and bring to the table. So you don't even have to speak on your own behalf after a while. So love that for sure. And so one other question, I've got a couple other questions for you. Many of us have heard that saying as to, you should become an asset at work, right? Like you should really become someone that they can count on. But how do you make sure that, you become that asset, you become valuable, because that's what an asset is. It's something that has value. But how do you make sure that you don't also get stuck because you know too much, or you become too valuable, you perform too well? So how do you kind of navigate that?
Yeah, that's tough. I think it comes down to boundaries
Okay.
because remember, all of the things that we're talking about come down to control and influence. The only things you can control are the things you do. You can influence what other people do, but you can't control it, right? And so I think it's really important to do excellent work. Excellent work does not get enough commentary in these streets. So we love talking about the career hack, but like, you know what has really worked for me? Doing the thing I said I was going to do really well,
Fact.
consistently. That is what makes you an asset. And having boundaries is really important because just because you're really good at your job or people know you to be an asset or reliable does not mean you should be a doormat. So you shouldn't be available all hours of the day and night. Because once you make yourself available all hours of the day and night, you're indispensable, but not in the way that we mean. You don't want to be like, you don't want to do that, right? Because you're kind of modeling for people how you want them to engage you. The other thing is I don't know if you can know too much about your function, but you could know too much about things that are not value additive. And what I mean by that is you don't want to get caught up in workplace gossip. You want to know, you want to listen, and kind of like I like to be a sponge, but you don't want to participate in that because, like I said, especially if you're growing within a company, you don't know how the person that you're working beside or with on a project is going to be. And like repeating gossip, I think I'm freezing, but hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, you're
if
back.
you're known as a gossip or I'm back. Okay. If you're known as a gossip or someone who participates in gossip, then that's going to be your reputation. And even if you're really good at your job, people will have lower levels of trust in you. So that's really the only time that I think you can know too much. But also think about just creating boundaries around when you're available, how you communicate, what you will and will not do. Because if you are doing a lot of things that are out of scope, especially in corporate, nonprofits are a little different because everybody out of scope. But in corporate, if you don't say like, you know what, I would love to support that, but if it does not move you forward on the thing that you were hired to do, then you have to be careful about that.
That's a good point. I feel when it comes to boundaries, we don't talk enough about that at work because we talk about, well, doing your best and giving it, being a team player and giving it your all and showing what you can offer, which sounds good, and you should do those things and give it your best. But you still have to draw a line and protect yourself, protect your own mental health, your own space, and so that people know that they have to respect you. They have to respect you. They have to respect your boundaries. That there's a lot that you can deliver, but you're not going to call me at 11 o'clock at night when I'm trying to go to bed because you want some report before someone else wakes up tomorrow. I'm sorry, it's going to have to wait. And so I think that's a whole other conversation we can talk about in terms of setting boundaries at work, because I think people have these expectations that because you work for me or because you work for this organization, you've got to do all the things. And the truth is, you have to set the tone to say, I'm happy to do what's asked. I'm happy to deliver, within the time frames that we've agreed on. But outside of that is my personal time, and people should respect that. So I love that. So I want to ask a follow-up question to that, in terms of being someone who's an asset. You've heard the saying about you can act like you have that next level job, like already act like you have that next role. So you're doing your boss's job. Do you think that also opens the door for you to take on too much, or for you to know too much if you're trying to do your boss's job and be seen as that at that next level already?
Yes, I get it. I know, like the career girlies of the 70s, 80s, and early 90s had us thinking like you need to dress like the job you want, and you need to take on some of your boss's responsibilities and make their life easy. I think you should make your boss's life easy, by delivering on what you were hired to do,
Yeah.
communicating about it so they can tell other people. And then occasionally, right, if you're batting above your weight class, meaning your work's not that challenging, you don't tell them it's not that challenging, but you say, hey, I would like to take on some stretch leadership and, see what that and workshop that together. However, you don't want to like over index on doing your boss's job because they get paid a lot more than you do. So you don't want to put yourself in a position to be, I call it muled, basically, where you were overworking and you were underpaid and undervalued. Because as soon as somebody can see, even if someone doesn't mean malintent, as soon as somebody can see that you can do more with less resources and less support, there's no reason to give you more resources and more support.
Right. Right.
So
It's like, okay, well, we don't need 10 people. If Tiffany can do the work of 3, I mean, we can shrink the team. And it's like, well, no, we're not going to do that either. And so I love that idea of, like you said, the key to making your boss's life easy is delivering on what you said that you were going to deliver, what's it within the scope, what's within the milestones that you've set. And like you said, if you do have some capacity, you can take on additional things, but you don't want to overload yourself or overburden yourself because people are going to be looking to give you more. When you look like you can take on more, they're going to give and give and give and place things on your plate. And I guess that also goes back to that boundary that we talked about setting a minute ago. And so I want to, but before we wrap up, I want to take it, especially since it's Black History Month. I want to take it there. How do things differ at work? And, when it comes to achieving or advancing in your career, how do things differ for Black people in the workplace? And if you want to speak to Black women as well, I know that all the rules are not equal for all of us. And so I want to make sure that if there's someone who's listening and who's like, yeah, that sounds well and good, but will that work for me? Not only as a person of color, but specifically as a Black person or a Black woman.
Yeah. I mean, I think the unfortunate bit is there are a lot of isms that impact us at work, right? Racism, sexism, ageism. I mean, even if you're not young, Black don't crack. So people think you're a lot younger than you are often. That's something I have experienced in my career. So everything that we've talked about tonight applies if you're Black and a person of color. And I also think that there can be a pattern of Black women, especially being overworked and undervalued. We tend to, I was talking to a friend of mine who's a corporate exec, because a ton of my clients, and it seems like there's just a ton of people on Twitter and LinkedIn talking about this. It's like the same story over and over. We could copy paste on all of us. Julia, you've probably experienced it. I've experienced it. A lot of the listeners maybe have experienced it, where Black women get brought into mid-level or senior level roles to clean up a mess somebody else made. They do a great job at cleaning up that mess that somebody else made, and they don't get recognized. They don't get paid more. They don't get elevated. They get discarded. Yep. And there is a lot of workplace trauma going on. Our good sis, Minda Harts, is the domain expert on the workplace trauma for us.
So sure.
Read the memo if you're listening and you haven't, you need to. And right within the second book about workplace trauma for Black women specifically, because those are blueprints and guides for us, right? To just heal and also protect ourselves in these spaces. But when it comes to workplace cultures and workplace wellness and this conversation around boundaries, I deeply believe that high achieving Black women need to be really thoughtful about protecting ourselves, protecting our intellectual property, protecting our emotional and mental health, because nobody else is going to do it. And I know, like, career things will say organizations don't love you. There's a book by Susan Jaffe called Work Won't Love You Back. And it sort of talks about the workplace contract and what we're signing up for. But for Black women, Black History Month, I want to tell y'all to lay down the mantle. Do what is in scope. Work really hard. Be excellent. There's nothing wrong with being high achieving, but you don't have to prove that you deserve the seat that you're taking up by getting burned out and taken advantage of, because people are going to try it. And we have to learn how to push back in a way that doesn't, have us out here without a job necessarily. But I don't know. I'm coming off a burnout too, so I have a little bit of bias in answering this question, Julia. But I think I spent a long time with one Caribbean parent, and I also believed that like working hard was enough to get rewarded. And I've learned time and time again that it's just not true. And so if we can balance doing good work with having pockets of joy outside of work, having an identity that is not our job, then I think we get a little bit closer to not losing ourselves.
And my sister gave me some really good advice some years ago, because I've gone through the burnout, but I've told her, I'm like, I'm working really hard, because what about the women that are coming behind me and all of that? And my sister said, she's like, it's admirable that you want to do that, but she's like, you can't help the woman behind you if you're burnt out. You're not
Right.
Jesus. Your role is not to save souls. Like that's not your role. And it's not to say that we shouldn't try our best to help who's next to us, but putting that burden on ourselves will keep us in these environments overworked, overburdened, burnt out, because we're trying to think about everyone else except ourselves. And so this is an invitation for any Black women who are listening. You don't have to take on the burdens or the sins of others. Like that's not your role. Do your best, give your best. But like I said, my sister gave me that advice, and it really just turn on the light bulb for me, because I was carrying such a weight, because I'm thinking about, well, what about those behind me? I want to set a good foundation and be a good, example for those who come into the organization. And she's like, yeah, forget all that. and because she's like, you have to care for yourself first before you can care for other people.
100%.
And so the last thing I'll ask before we get out of here is, what final piece of advice would you share with our viewers and listeners as they think about how to advance their career? We've talked about a lot tonight. So is there any one thing that you'd want to leave with them before we head out?
Ooh, yeah, one thing. I would just encourage everyone listening. It doesn't matter if you're new, mid-career, whatever. I feel like I've been having a lot of conversations with people about getting back to the basics that are not about the industry you're in or the job function you have. They're really about the human element of work. So if you can get yourself into an improv class or a communication coaching experience like Toastmasters, or just, it doesn't have to cost a lot of money, something that will allow you to sharpen or develop your soft skills. I like to call them durable skills, like communication.
Durable skills. I like that. Okay.
Emotional intelligence, like how you relate to other humans. That is going to really help you as you progress in your career, because 99% of the time, especially as you take on leadership roles, the challenges are not the content of the work. You're typically influencing other people to get the work done at that point. And if you haven't started working on those skills earlier in your career, it's going to be a rockier road when you get to that next level.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I mean, thank you, Tiffany, for being here tonight. I mean, just not to use a Clubhouse reference, but for all the good gems, all the jewels that you dropped this evening. We're so grateful. How can people connect with you if they want to work with you or learn more? You want to share a little bit about your information?
For sure. I exist on the internet like all of us do over at Tiffany Waddell Tate on Instagram. And my website is careermavenconsulting.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn as well. Same handle as my Instagram name.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Tiffany, career and leadership boss. Thank you for sharing with us. And everyone, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again next week.
Thanks, Julia.